reports.
Yes, I know.
So now we're gonna get twitchy. 'Cause
We're not quite sure what we're reading,
It's
so
something different.
now that the recorder's on, we'll call the meeting to order for the July 24th
It's not
Finance
his fault, I
Committee.
asked
Noah,
him.
you're on with
Okay.
your PowerPoint.
Well, not the PowerPoint yet, I was trying to pull this up at the same time. So we'll go through our normal stuff, our fund accounts and our sales tax report. I think we'll start with the sales tax report, because we were talking, and Rob said, hey, can we present this differently? And I've been thinking about this for a while, presenting differently. So it's a little cleaner, a little easier to follow than I think the previous format was. So we're gonna roll this out, test it with you, see what you think, see if it's your preference.
Mr. Jingles.
So what you have here again at the top is the sales tax collections. We created a summary budget to actuals table at the top, and then we get into actually the monthly detail breakdown. So again, I'm just going to kind of walk through the layout here to get you familiar with it. Again, at the top table here, you see budget for 2017 of $4,516,000, and the budget for 18 was $4,651,000 for a total biennial budget of $9,167,000. Below that row, you have the actuals received in 17 as well as 18, and received in total for the biennial budget. To the right, you see a big box that says percentage of biennial budget received. So again, I want to have something that could quickly identify how much revenue we have received measured against our biennial budget. So this says that year to date through the end of June, I think it includes July. Yeah, through the end of June, we've received 78% of the sales tax that we budgeted for on our biennial basis. The details have the over-under here for 2017 and 2018. Again, 2017 we were over in sales tax by $209,000, and year to date, no surprise, we're under $2,219,000 with 6 months still to go of collections. So not a concern there, especially when we look at the overall percentage of our biennial budget. Now we have 6 months remaining to go. Further down, the next table shows you the actuals on a monthly basis for 17 and 18. And again, the biennial summation is in a column as well. The next table over gives you the year-over-year change, looking at actuals only now. So you can see that in this first cell, January collections in 18 were up $34,000 compared to January collections in 17. Okay, so that's how you can read that table, and we can see that the year-over-year change is that we're up $211,000 for the same 6-month period compared to 17. Again, getting a reflection on what's actually going on with the sales tax revenue on an annual basis. The next table over then measures your actuals against the budget. So we can see here that from the budget we set on a monthly basis, again, the first column there is 2018 budget. The actuals we received are actually $39,000 more than the budget. So year to date is $204,000 more than what we had budgeted for. So we're approximately 8% more than our budget, but we're actually 10% higher than the previous year's collections. So you got some reflection on what's actually happening versus what we budgeted for. Any questions on the layout and kind of the purpose there?
Well, I want to make sure that, are these just looking at the over-under on a month-to-month, or is this a rolling?
This is the over on monthly for 18 measured against 18 only.
Okay, but this is just for the month, so when you look at the February 32,000, that's just for February?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And then the bottom box is year-to-date.
And then for Cindy, if you don't know, when you look at January, like if you look at February,
Yes.
that's actually sales tax for December. It's reported on a 2-month delay.
Okay. Thank you.
That's why February always looks
So good.
good.
It's Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty decent.
Yeah,
Right.
no, as far as sales tax going, really good news. And I like the big box up here that just tells me where I'm at compared to my budget,
70%.
because it's a
Right.
quick look, I know where I'm at. And I think it really stands out here when we look down below to the REIT table. Again, the layout is exactly the same, it's just the dollars now are populated for REIT. And again, what you can see is that, real quick glance, of what we had budgeted, we've received 109% of what we budgeted. So we have already received more REIT revenue than we budgeted. When you look at the over-under for 17, you see that we We're up 370,000 roughly in 17. But year to date, again, we're down, but that's okay because we've still got 6 months to go. And then what I find actually to be very interesting is when you look down to the last table in the actuals and monthly detail breakdown, when you see the year-over-year change of actuals, when we looked at 2018 collections versus 2017, we are actually 117,000 less in collections. Okay, but on the flip side, if you look at how we're comparing to what we budgeted, we're actually $91,000 up in what we budgeted. So from a budgeting perspective, it's better than what we budgeted, but from actual collections, it's less than what we actually collected in 17.
And Cindy, that would be, if you'll notice, a major property sold. And so we received quite a bit of REIT money, and it was probably those apartments.
The
up in
apartment,
Sydney.
251 was the apartments, and then the September number of 111 was Safeway changed hands.
Okay.
Safeway
Yeah.
Complex
Okay.
changed hands.
So that will potentially have another big impact on the actuals to actuals comparison.
So you need to be careful as we
Yes.
budget the next biennium that we've got these outliers out
Right,
here. that-
Right.
Yeah.
So going back up to sales tax, and as far as the actual over budgeted, we're about 8.4% over for 18.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's good. And
Which
fact
is
that
the
we're-
204,000.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Our prior report had that 5-year average, which I think is a
Right.
great budgeting tool.
Right.
But I don't know how relevant was to our monitoring. You know, I think
I like
year to
this.
date and the prior year are much more relevant.
I like this.
Yeah,
I
I
like,
prefer this too.
yeah.
Good. Okay.
Oh,
We
we
have
got
the
it.
fund.
Yeah.
We got the fund
Keep them
report.
busy. And I just wanted, so backing up to this, and I was doing some noodling, and, because I'm hearing from other boards I sit on, the sales tax is flattening a bit, and we're, as we heard, 10% year over year. And so, and if you look at the third and fourth quarter of last year, those $400,000 numbers, those are our best months we've ever had. And so if we did flatten out, I just did a projection, if we just did exactly what we did last year, we would still be 4.5% over the prior year and well ahead of budget. So, I'm hoping we're an anomaly with Tremont, and we're charging ourselves sales tax on it, all the housing starts we have. Maybe we're not gonna carry the trend that others are, but in case we are, I just wanted to let you know, I did kind of do a little projection, and I think even if that held true, I think we're gonna be fine.
That is kind of interesting what happens third and fourth quarter last year. It is more, did Titus start selling more cars or gray or?
Well, or is it the housing? You build more houses, you buy more materials.
Could be the housing, yeah, although.
Did they
it
buy
didn't-
those materials within Port Orchard?
They get delivered to Port Orchard, and I think there's a destination.
And there's a,
Yeah.
okay,
Mhm. Yeah.
okay.
The other thing
Yeah,
is.
I mean, I rubbed my crystal ball, and that's the best I came up with.
Yeah.
Well, and you
Yeah.
also have online sales,
Yeah,
which are
there's-
destination based.
Yeah.
But, well, that's true, that's destination based. I was gonna say, from the state perspective, and we've been trying to track that down as well. One of the biggest online sales is Amazon, who's already in our state, so. And they would charge sales tax because they have brick and mortar in our state, so. But what we've found is, a lot of it is just the building industry in the county is real strong.
And that would, and we're having building here, so I get that. But the mayor was saying that other jurisdictions were flat, but they're building.
The other the countywide stuff, some of the boards I sit on, they're saying they're seeing it soften. So,
Yeah.
and I'm just,
Right.
so I just.
See, we're
made-
not, that's the unusual part, is
counties,
Transit is
but
countywide.
the county is.
Silverdale is brick and
county.
mortar, which is struggling
Yeah.
nationwide. I
Which,
think.
what?
The Silverdale is a lot of
Oh,
brick and mortar.
So
Right.
I just, it just made me,
Right.
it just made me
Right.
think. So I noodled
Right.
on it a little
Right.
bit,
No,
and
exactly.
I hope we continue to be strong. But if we're not, and it does flatten, we're still gonna be fine to budget, I believe, even if it's flat.
The issue of the county was an interesting one because I kept hearing that the county was pretty flat, and at one point they were saying it was a little bit in the deficit. And yet Transit's is real strong until I realized that Transit's include the cities.
Right.
Kitsap County doesn't.
Yeah.
So the sales that are going on in the cities are a noticeable difference between what we get and what Kitsap County get.
And we have more building starts, see, on all of the cities, so.
Certainly that
I-
all contributes.
Yeah.
But the
so-
county has Silverdale, which really is a city, and probably has some of the highest retail around,
Yeah,
right?
but a lot of, cars,
Yeah.
Bremerton.
Bremerton is
Bremerton.
a big car sales. Obviously, we have some, Ballsville has some. There's not an awful lot of car sales out in the county.
But now we're gonna have Kitsap RV,
We got RVs, we have some RVs.
except it's big, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
So anyway,
Okay.
I took you down a rabbit hole.
Yep.
Yeah, but no, I think it was one that needed to be said out loud.
And I just noticed that this is not the same cash investment report that we're used to seeing.
Right.
So it's like we ran the wrong report. I can go run that now, or we can come back to it and I can distribute to it later.
I think you
I'll
just
leave that to you
distribute it
guys.
later. Basically, we're still
Important one is, I think,
strong.
Yeah.
the balances,
Yeah,
and we
yeah.
separate, the other report had in an income statement and had balance sheet activity too. Now we have a balance sheet report and an income statement report, and we've set, by doing the new format, we've taken the REIT balances off of it.
Oh.
Because they're captured on this other report
Right.
that you were already getting. And,
Right.
don't get overly rosy about the 2.8 or 2.1 million in REIT. We've spent $1 million of that. It's obligated, so.
Yeah. So I'll email you guys the other report that actually sums it up better. This has all the detail, but it's broken down by GL line, cash
Right.
and investments, so it's there, just not digestible. All right, so with that, we can turn our attention to Tremont. And we've got the big spreadsheet. And finance is also working on providing more timely and, again, more focused, summarized data to our department heads, the mayor, staff, when we talk about all these different projects. So we got lots of projects going on. One thing we haven't been doing a good job is communicate that to other department heads real in a clean, succinct way. And so we're working on developing this project template for all our projects. And it'll be real helpful for finance because it helps us to identify, well, let me walk through this. And it'll really show, I think, in McCormick as the real example. Push Tremont in here to be a coverage to see if it helped. But what we are going to identify is the original budget as adopted.
Are we Tremont or,
Are you looking at Tremont? Yeah.
Uh-huh, okay.
We'll go Tremont first.
You're gonna go to Tremont first? Okay.
Yeah. So what this table, again, it's going to be a template, will show is what was originally adopted. Normally, it would be part of the biennial budget process, so it'd say as of 1/1/2017. But again, when we adopted Tremont, we didn't have, Tremont was not part of the biennial budget. It came later once we got the funding sources secured and the contract, so it's 9/1/2017 for now. The current budget column will actually reflect all the changes that have taken place that are legally authorized in amended budget. So we'll have an original budget, then you'll have your current budget. Now we included a new column in here called projected budget, because as we're working with Public Works and they identify, hey, we're gonna have some change orders coming to this is coming to council this date, we want to find a way to track that and then have the conversation that if you're gonna bring this change order, what's your funding source, right? How can we clearly identify that? So that's what that column will show. The actuals, again, will show the actual sources used to pay for the projects and the actual expenses down below, and the remaining budget authority within our sources and the uses of the funds. And then we have some percentages running over here and an identifier of if future budget amendments are needed. So turn your attention again, we'll see this in the big spreadsheet. But,
Question.
yep.
The numbers are different in the current budget versus the original budget, but the totals do not reflect that. In particular, the Bond Street.
Correct.
It's the two added together, REIT 2 and Bond Street, that equals the Bond Street original.
Yeah, so again, when we did the budget amendment, we did not increase the sources of funding available. What we did was a shuffle. We used some of the bond proceeds and replaced them with REIT 2. So you can see in the original budget, we had no REIT 2. And
I
the
see,
bond proceeds
okay.
went down.
All right, so the bond proceeds went down, but you replaced it with a REIT, okay.
Yeah, if you guys
Right,
remember
and
that
then
budget
we
amendment.
have to repay REIT or repay something.
Well, we took the bond proceeds, the $1 million contingency, because we had a spend down requirement.
Right.
And we spent it on the park.
Correct.
And so now, instead of being bond proceeds,
It's REIT.
we need to replace it with REIT money.
Right.
So
Which
it's
is what we
coming
were
in.
gonna use on the park.
Right.
What we were gonna use, so
Yes.
what we were doing is making sure that we met our spend down requirements on the bond earlier.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that's why we didn't increase the budget authority for the sources. Nope, same sources. But you will notice here now in the projected budget, down below here in the red where this is our expenses, this is where we are currently sitting as far as what we anticipate with all these new change orders coming. So we're anticipating, again, all the change orders haven't been approved by council yet, but this is what we're kind of anticipating, seeing down the pipeline, that the project budget is going to increase to approximately $18.5 million, which leaves me with a funding shortfall of $564,000 now. Okay, so we're not here to solve that today, but again, what the table's meant to do is work with Public Works as they identify these things. We can update the information so it's best information. We know what we have legally authorized. We know where we're currently standing, and any issues that might need to come forward.
So this additional 564, when does it come for approval?
So let's turn to the big spreadsheet because you're used to this one.
No, does that 564 include the 200 for the water
It
line?
does.
Okay.
It does. Yep. So.
But where's our $1 million in contingency?
Okay, well, I'm glad you asked that back. Okay, 'cause this is where it will really stand out. You see the miscellaneous expenses?
Uh-huh,
You see how it was originally budgeted at 1.1?
Right.
And now you see projected it's at 100.
right.
The $1 million of contingencies is now been spent, and you see the construction costs have increased from 12.7 to 14.4. So all those contingencies dollars that were unplanned expenses have now been identified as expenses that we anticipate to be true now. And so you're seeing that rolled into the actual construction costs of all these change orders. So when you ask where's the contingency dollars, the contingency dollars have now all been reallocated for actual expenditures to come. And we're lumping that into
And we're gonna have
construction.
the session tonight and to talk about some specific line items in particular. There's a 200 of that 500 is a water line that we want to do.
Mhm.
It's out of the area of effect, so we can't do it as a change order. And it's too large for us from a procurement standpoint to do ourselves. So we're gonna have to, we wanna do it, but we're holding off to make sure that we're 97, 98% out of the ground. There's sidewalks being formed up. We don't think there's gonna be anything else, but we don't wanna go do this water line and have another surprise. And yesterday was one with Puget Sound Energy and WashDOT about the street lights that are over the interchange, and for some reason WashDOT wants it's basically a big breaker box so they can work on it, and they approved the plans and then came back at the 11th hour and were basically trying to put a stop to everything. And we're going, no. So it's it was $5,000, at least at this point, that we know about for this pedestal and breaker box. But, you know, we're not stopping for anything. You know, the trench is in, the wire's in, we'll splice it or whatever. So anyway, Mike can speak more to those individual items, but it's mostly related to quantity changes in the ditches and unsuitable materials in the ditches. So we're sharing the information as fast as we're getting it.
Yeah.
So this is meant to kind of roll up all this information to be a little more absorbable.
Right.
Especially when you're talking with your
Rather than
constituents
this
and
guy.
departments, rather than the big one. But the big one still has all the detail. And so again, we can focus on the actual expenditures, and I'll point out this blue section here where we've added in all the change orders now that are coming. Okay, so we can keep track of those separately from what was, I guess, not a change order before. And so on the rolled up spreadsheet, you see the construction go from 12.7 to 14.4. That includes schedules A through all these blue change orders. So if you want to go back, I know you'll probably want to do that. So I'm just pointing out where you're going to
You
tie
see,
the
I've
numbers.
already-
Yeah, I'm like,
I've already
let me just
doing
tell you
it.
where you're going to tie the numbers so then it's a little bit easier. And then the architecture, engineering support, again, you can look at the the construction admin costs, all the way down to that miscellaneous expense, to the 18.4. And then we have this Berger ABAM management contingency reserve, 100,000, to bring us to our new project total of 18,564 right here. I know the writing is small, so you see it, John, right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to make sure these numbers are tying back to what's in the spreadsheet and rolling up so it's a little more absorbable. What you'll see is that contingency here in this spread, in the big spreadsheet, is now 0. Because anytime there were dollars up here added, it was pulling from the contingency because those were unplanned expenses. Now the expenses are planned and identified. Does that make sense? Okay.
I liked it better 6 months ago when we thought there was,
Yeah, $1 million
All the
to
extra
be
money
had.
sitting there.
Yeah.
It's getting a little
Yeah.
tight.
And you also
Well,
notice again in the big
$500,000.
spreadsheet down here below, the funding sources haven't changed. We're still 18 million. So we will come back to that in the future once we feel like we need to.
We'll dive into that a little bit deeper tonight
Yeah.
in executive session.
So year to date, you can say we've spent $8.6 million on the project, about 48% through it. We have about 52% remaining of funding sources available for the project. So we're, according to this, we're about midway through the project, but we know lots of paving is going to be coming on in the next couple months and then early spring. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this, to Tremont, Rob? No?
does this make everybody happy?
Or
I'm
nervous.
not meaning council, I'm meaning active and,
We'll talk
Urgent.
about it tonight.
okay.
Yep. Okay, so that's the update on Tremont. And now I wanted to, since I want this to be a template for all our projects, I wanted to throw out the McCormick Woods Park. Again, now you're a little more familiar with the layout and what it's telling us. Again, I think this is important because we talked about this at the last meeting about what to expect coming forward.
Right.
So again, we have the original budget at $955,000 for sources. Expenses were $955,000 in construction. Current budget, what's been actually adopted by council, $1.346 million in sources and $1.346 million in expenses. So far so good.
Yeah, they match. That's good.
We're matching. We're doing good. Now we're looking forward and saying, okay, what do we know differently?
Oh, we've got that bond funding, okay.
Yes. So you see the bond funding wasn't in
Right.
there before, and now it's in there. Also, you'll notice I have some cells highlighted in yellow because these will require budget amendments going forward. And what I want to point out is I guess we'll focus on the uses first. So we're projecting the total cost to be $1.486 million. And you can see the costs that weren't originally in the current budget or the original budget. Rather, I believe these values were all intended and included in the original construction line item.
And
Okay.
we know, other than the 30,000 that we talked about last week, we knowingly approved a contract that we didn't have a budget authority, knowing we were gonna bring back a cleanup after finance identified sources. The council said, hey, no, we wanna build this park with all the amenities, and the contract was awarded. So this isn't cost overruns on the project. The only one we're having is the bridge that we talked about for roughly 30,000.
So again, we're just trying to accurately reflect what we think is going on with the project, all the costs included, all the sources of funding. And in this circumstance, we've already identified, the previous meeting we talked about the funding source. And so I've identified in yellow, we would anticipate needing $80,000 more in park impact fees. Again, you can see that in the far right column of future amendments needed. We would also request probably $77,000 in recreation reserve funding to make up the funding shortfall.
Now, how much do we have in that fund, do you know?
Currently, I think 250, something like that.
And the recreation.
In the
reserve.
recreation reserve, yeah. Now, the park impact fee, $80,000 will bring it to zero. So that will wipe that out, and then we'll still have a little bit in the rec reserve.
What's the source of that recreational reserve?
The mission
Emissions
tax
tax.
Okay.
for movies.
Yeah. So this is what I propose we use as the funding sources and how the budget amendment will change and look. If you guys said, no, we don't want that, I would back those numbers out, and all you would see is the funding shortfall. And we'd talk about, okay, what funding sources do we have available? What would you like to do?
So you're backing down on the McCormick Woods Park fees.
We're spending
17.
it all. That's the last of it, the 39,000.
Yeah. So originally, we had thought we would have 57,000 there.
In reality,
In
we
reality,
have
we have
39.
39.
Okay,
Yep.
that's why I was wondering why
Yep.
it backed down.
Yeah, there were some expenses incurred in the prior year that didn't show up till after the biennial budget period ended. So it showed up in December, and we adopted the budget in November, and so that's why we got 39,000. And so we just got to true that up.
Yeah.
Is that a budget amendment? And the other two are actually adding resources to the project
Right.
to cover the shortfall.
Okay.
So I'll make sure you guys are comfortable with this template, because as we start to talk about projects, I'll keep trying to roll it out in this format so we can at least track what we're doing, any proposed changes, and any funding shortfalls. So in Tremont, I didn't solve the funding issue. I just said, hey, I got a funding issue. This one I said, I think I've solved the funding issue, and this is what I proposed, and you can see the change and what the amendments would be going forward.
But we're not, going back to McCormick.
Yep.
In our original budget, we were taking money out of REIT, and we're no longer doing that.
Correct. Yep. You can see that original budget. We had REIT money. We amended the budget, took that
Yeah.
REIT money away, and supplanted it with bond funding.
Yep.
So again, that's another real useful tool, is it communicates what we're doing over time.
Right.
A little more clearly, succinctly, and we're also going to work on writing our budget amendments to be a little more reader-friendly to track as well. Okay, so moving on, the AP Authority Ordinance. As you guys recall, every December,
I don't think there's a handout.
there's no handout, sorry,
There's a packet on
it's
that.
just on the item. So every December, Finance Director comes forward, says, hey, you guys are missing, council's not meeting for one of the meetings, we need to release
that's right.
checks. Please grant me some authority to release the checks, and we'll come back to you and receive full approval. So I'd like to run this idea by you guys to see, seeking a more permanent solution to this issue, because it's going to come up in August, it's also going to come up again in December. So I would propose putting some language forward that gives me the authority, the finance director, to release the checks, and then follow back up with council at the next regularly scheduled meeting and put it in the code, so that we don't have to continually do these ordinances.
So that's on an ongoing, anytime you want, that's how it would work?
Yeah.
Or anytime we miss a council meeting. when
That's
we
why I'm
change-
curious,
Yeah.
is it tied to missing the council meeting, or is it just anytime you
Yeah.
want?
It's any time that the finance director would feel the need to. And I'll make my case for why I think this makes sense. I've looked at SAO, they have guidelines for how this is done, other cities have done this. We proposed this in Yelm, and the reason I want to get there is because from an accounts payable perspective, I want to be releasing funds for services that we've already contracted and rendered. So the money we actually owe on a business practice rather than tied to council dates. So if I need to produce a check today for a certain reason, I'd like to produce that check, release it. I'm not,
Can't exceed your budget
I
authority.
can't exceed my budget authority. I'm still constrained by budget authority. And I still have to bring everything back to you guys, just like we do now. I would just bring it back at the next regular scheduled meeting or on a monthly basis. It helps to streamline our business processes, because AP is always geared towards when's the next council meeting date. I gotta get everything done by next council meeting date. So we're cramming from an accounts payable processing perspective to get everything tied to council meeting dates rather than from a business need. Rather than, hey, we can produce checks on a Friday, get them out there, pay there. And as we move next year into streamline AP and moving more towards electronic fund EFTs rather than checks, it'll be also another important tool that we can use to actually pay our vendors when we're supposed to, come back to council, get the proper authority and blessing on it, and still be within the council minutes.
So what happens if the council decides that, no, that's not appropriate?
Yeah, so if the council does take that action, you would put language in there to say that council rejects something, that becomes the accounts receivable, and the finance department will go to collections to collect that money back. So I want to run the idea by you before I hold down the language from SAO, because they have some template language, and MRC has some template language that others have already done this. City of Brenton does it, and their policy really laid that out. Said, hey, council's given the finance director to release checks on a timely basis as he sees fit. The finance director will bring back all applicable registers to the council for proper approval. If council rejects a particular payment, the finance director will do anything they can do collection-wise to remedy the situation, and it will become an accounts receivable, and they will seek proper remedies. So I'd lay
When-
those three main goals. There's some other
Right.
accounting-wide policies in there, but
When
those are the big three.
we were requiring the mayor to sign every check, I would have absolutely no problem with that at all, because the mayor is signing every check. But we've given you the authority to like rubber stamp your signature or whatever.
Right.
So they're not being looked at by anyone.
Well, like
No,
currently
they are.
what's happening is you get the register, I get the register on Tuesday.
Right,
Okay, we aren't issuing those checks that have my digital signature on them until you bless them at the council meeting, and I've reviewed them also, currently.
But
Now,
what he's proposing,
but we could make part of that procedure is I still have to review them as part of the procedure.
Well, and I want to address your point back is that, yes, AP gets reviewed a lot. We got at least 5 people reviewing AP on any check.
Okay.
So this is something we're going to address.
Who?
We got,
all AP employees?
no,
Okay.
okay, so we got Patty, she's our AP processor. Then we have the department heads who are approving the expense, signing off coding. And then that goes to Heidi, who reviews Patty's work to verify that she's using the proper GLs, proper codes. And then that goes to Rebecca, who reviews all that before it comes to me, who I review it. Then I kick it to you guys for your review before it comes to council. So those numbers are being touched, reviewed, scrubbed, changed, sent back long before it ever gets to producing a check. So I want to address that because you said
Yeah,
aren't these being
I would
reviewed?
have,
And
yeah,
it is
I
being
have.
reviewed lots.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not the payables person is just gonna pay the bills without
Yeah.
Right.
other folks
Yeah.
touching.
Right.
So there's lots of internal
That
controls
was-
in place right now
That
to
would be
review
my
the
question,
expenses.
is just, is there a control mechanism so that
Yes.
somebody's
Yeah.
not just writing themselves a check?
Yeah. And we want to keep these tight internal controls in place because
Right.
SAO.
And if you're
demands
gonna
that.
want me to be part of that process, I would think, in the occasion that I'm gone on vacation, we're gonna require the mayor pro tem
Mhm.
then to review. If we're gonna go to a weekly, and I don't know that we're going to, if it's gonna be, we're gonna issue checks and electronic checks on Fridays, because it's more of a business process now.
Right.
On Thursday, am I gonna need to set time out to
To do that,
It takes, that report, it takes 10, 15 minutes to review it and to look at it. It's not a huge undertaking.
It sounds to me like we have some pretty strong controls in place, and it would be nice perhaps if they were outlined or at least mentioned in the
Yeah,
ordinance that
absolutely.
comes.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about that, Jeff?
Well, I'm processing.
Yeah.
I feel better knowing that the appropriate department head is also signing
Right.
off on it, so that we know that, I love you, Noah, but
Yeah, I don't want to
you're
sign
not-
work stuff.
you're
Yeah.
approving
Yeah.
a check to you, kind of
Right.
thing, so.
Yeah, no, and that's the way it's supposed to be set up, right?
Yeah.
Because if Mark's incurring the expense, I'm not going to know what it's for.
Right.
If it comes across my desk, I'm going to ask the same questions that Rob is. What's this for? Why are we doing it? And if Mark's not signing off on it and approving it, where's that check and balance? And this came up, what was it, last year, Rob, when Patty and AP caught a reoccurring invoice that was showing up. So we got somehow,
Oh, it was I know.
you know what I'm talking about? The
Yeah,
oil,
out at Public
the
Works,
crud.
they were dumping, are you talking about the deliveries
The
of?
deliveries, yes. we
Yeah, and
kept
they
getting
were just
deliveries.
delivering, okay, there's nobody typically, and we're gonna address some things with security up there with, but we're working on that, but they were delivering product we didn't order.
Oh.
Degreaser, things legitimately we would use, and.
They were showing up, the
and
guys
they're
were
just showing
receiving
up.
it, and so because we accepted the product, all of a sudden we were receiving an invoice. The finance doesn't have a clue. The guys
Right.
in the field don't really know. So
Yeah.
you had this kind
Well,
of.
somebody ordered degreaser again, well, we
Yeah.
didn't.
And at first it was like, hey, we have this greaser sample we'd like to send you, and one guy said, sure, cool, send it.
Oh,
And so
God.
start that way.
Pretty much, yeah.
And it was, $200, then $300, then $400. Well, it finally got to Patty
the
after a couple
magazine.
months going, I've seen this come up $1,000, $999.99 every month now. Why is that? And I said, well, I don't know, go ask Mark. So then we started talking Public Works. kind of feathered our way through this, said, okay, that was attempt at fraud here. We're not paying these ones, reject these ones, so we had to clean that up. But that's a situation where, like you said, we want the sign off from the person ordering those supplies, the department head, because that's the internal
Yeah.
control check for us.
Yeah, we have a requisition purchase order
Yeah.
process that
Right.
And we're gonna put some cameras on the building out there in the yard and in the mechanic bays, not in the bays offices or anything else.
For what?
Security, because we have people coming, I mean, the building is unlocked and,
Do we
you
have
know,
things missing? Is that?
we could have things missing or we have things delivered that, and who delivered it and things of that nature. We're also.
What I heard you say is whoever delivered it, somebody signed for it.
Right.
No, they weren't. They were
Well, in our degreaser, somebody did. When,
Oh,
the,
were
when the
they?
shop guys
Okay.
signed it. Yeah.
not
Not
unknowingly.
knowing
Yeah,
that it
not
was a
knowing.
legitimate order, they
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
signed it as receiving it.
Not
Exactly.
always the case, though.
Right.
Was what I learned.
Right.
Stuff is just showing.
Well,
up.
I guess, closing this thing off, I'd just like to look at the language, and if you've got
Absolutely.
stuff that's,
Yeah. So it sounds like you're
I
warm to
still
it.
want to kind of
I'll bring back
process it
some
for a
language
while.
and we can talk about it at
Yeah.
another meeting.
As
Okay.
long as we have the appropriate controls in
Yep,
place.
yep,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
my concern. I
Yeah.
want to see how that's going to be.
Exactly.
So next
Yeah.
month, we're gonna need to fall back to our practice in the past that on that second meeting in August, because we don't have a third meeting.
Yeah, we'll
You're gonna
let
need
you
a
know.
resolution to authorize this.
Yeah.
But maybe next finance committee meeting, Noah can bring back
Yeah.
some draft language
Sure.
for you to look at.
I'd hoped to, but I didn't pull together in time. So, good.
It's not on the PowerPoint?
On to the PowerPoint.
Okay.
Are we doing okay time? All right. 2018-2017 budget status. Let's see. So Rob had asked us, and I want to actually bring this to the full council maybe next month in August, and a more complete. So if you guys remember in the first quarter, we did this 2017 look back, kind of went through all the funds, look at the departments, and then we went to the capital side. So I'm proposing we do that again. Where is
Since we're
my?
halfway through the year, just to say, here's where we're at the budget.
Yeah, and it's really because as we're teeing up to talk about the budget, we're 18 months through a 24-month period. How are we performing? Is there any concerns? So I quickly, I don't know if you guys knew this, but we got our intern hired about a month ago or so, started in July. He's doing a fabulous job for
Okay.
us. So I had him start updating this. And so I only had him update the general fund and the department stuff. And for the full council, I'll do what I did before with the water sewer fund. The reason I didn't get it updated in this presentation is because of the challenge of the water sewer fund being commingled. And that goes back to our next topic of splitting the water sewer fund. It takes more time to split the water operations capital out as opposed to the general fund. So when we looked at the general fund, let's blow this up a little bit so it's a little bit easier to see. Am I hitting the wrong thing? I'll go here. There we go.
Sure.
That worked.
It's beautiful. The right colors. Okay. All right, so again, this is 18 months out of the 24-month period. Okay. So far through June, we've received 80% of our biennial budget. With
Doesn't match that other report we got. It says
Well, that
70.
because that's just sales tax, and this has got real estate tax in it.
This is all general fund revenues. So 80%, so 20% is our remaining revenue target for the remaining 6 months, which is good. I like to see that, because again, we're about 75% through a time period. And then expenses are 70% of our biennial budget, so again, we have 30% capacity still remaining on our expenditure side for the general fund. So those are two good indicators that we're on track. We're not over budget for where we're at 75% through our budget.
That lets you know some great big things that are coming in in the
Unless
last
there's-
couple of weeks.
Well, and challenge, Public Works is just challenged to get to all the work we can.
Yeah.
That's part of the equation.
Yep. And then again, we broke it down by department. Everyone, for the most part, is below or right about 70%, which is good. It means we still have capacity on our budget by department. So again, all indicators, if this was over 75 or 80%, then you'd start saying, hey, department head, just so you know, you're running out of budget capacity. Beware.
So we need more degreaser.
more degreaser. So again, all good things as it reflects back on kind of where we're at with the budget. Street fund, so far we've received 77% of our revenues. So again, that's on track. And expenses are 61% of our biennial budget. So a little less than what we would have expected, I guess, for 75% through the budget period. But again, there could be some big street work coming up here in the coming months because we got 39% capacity. So that's something I could talk about with Mark and find out, hey, what do you got planned the next 6 months? You got 40% of your capacity still, but that's good. And again, I didn't get to these 3 because the challenge is breaking up these, and so in the future I'll have those. We do have our capital projects updated though. So when we looked, again, I want to put this other, say, what have we spent for this biennial period? And the orange reflects what we've actually spent, and green reflects what capacity there still is. So not a whole lot of
That number will get eaten by 200 if you guys approve a
That-
water line next to
Oh,
Tremont.
oh.
So we'll eat half
Okay.
of that in one bite.
Is that where we're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, not a whole lot of spending going on through the first 18 months. But if you remember, when I was at 17, there was none. So I see some orange getting used. But we expect actually well 9 to...
That should start really coming.
That should start really
They
coming in.
really
So-
hit their stride out there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of activity going on.
And even well 13 over the next couple months should start spending. And these are our big dollars. So sewer projects. Now I hope this stands out to you guys as it did to me. We should have some in here. Maybe we haven't got any
We
more
haven't
yet.
approved that contract yet.
Uh,
Oh, yes, we have.
We have. We just
approved it. We
haven't
haven't
gotten any
spent any
invoices
money
yet. Yeah. So again, not a whole lot of expenses going on yet. Tremont sewer improvements. The only reason we call this out differently, and I'm still toying with this, whether I want to call out the portions of Tremont that are for sewer and storm and transportation separately like this. Because again, when we originally did this, we did it by category type. And so these were sewer improvements related with the Tremont project. So it's included in the big spreadsheets. It's a part of the overall project, but I originally categorized it as a sewer project. So I'm still toying with whether I like that or not. The one you should see that stands out is this Marina Pump Station. Currently, there have been some expenses paid for this, but we do not have any budget authority for this yet. So that's why you see that negative 722 here.
And you're about to approve a contract for that design tonight, so which will
So we
require-
So we're
Spend-
gonna have even more.
It'll be
Correct.
Even- it
It's
will
about
be-
250
It's gonna get
for the
even bigger.
contract.
We'll
It's gonna
have
be bigger.
even- it's gonna
We
be-
spent 722,000 and we don't
No,
have.
it's 22, $722.
$22,
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
less than $1,000.
less than 1,000.
So
Are you
that's,
covering that, Mr. Mayor, or how's it?
It's coming out of Public Works budget somehow. And we'll need a budget amendment, but it's, work we've
Right.
discussed at Utility Committee and.
Why would we need a budget amendment if it's coming out of something that they've already had approved?
That item isn't, but they have capacity in their budget for $1,000.
Yeah.
We need to approve $722.
Well, you might as well when you're gonna amend 250,000 roughly, that's on
Yeah.
So you just kind of slid that in on the
the,
water
I
main?
didn't, it's his PowerPoint.
Hey, I'm just pulling the numbers and looking.
Oh, I appreciate you breaking it
Yeah.
out, but when
Yeah.
it comes to approval, I'm just curious.
Yeah, so that's a good segue because tonight you're going to see
So
the
you-
contract for the 250, and so there will be a request for awarding a contract. And if I had filled this out for the Marina Pump Station, you would say, hey, nothing in original budget, nothing in current budget, but we have expenditures.
right, but I'm looking at that
anticipated.
505 for the Tremont sewer improvements.
Yes.
Is that our projected budget there? We've shown 495. Is that reflected there? No.
It is not.
Okay.
The projected sources will change, and I haven't updated that column on Tremont.
Okay.
Because we know for a fact that there have been more water sewer expenses,
Okay.
and we're going to then request that the water sewer utility pay for those expenses, because that's what they were for. But that's not reflected here yet.
So if they were, as the result of the road, the street fund has to pay them. If they're
Oh,
true sewer water capacity improvements.
Okay,
the utility
okay.
pays for.
Okay,
Even just
okay.
because we replaced a pipe, if the road caused the
That,
replacement of
okay.
the pipe, that's
Okay.
where the money has to
Yes.
come from.
Okay, okay,
So when we get into the change order stuff, there's several things that we've already identified. Say, no, this is a sewer and water improvement. You can't use transportation dollars for that.
okay.
And
Okay.
unfortunately, the big one had to come out of the general fund
Fund.
because it was a result of the
The
road.
road, okay.
Yeah. So I'm hoping our next finance committee meeting that I'll have these projected to really reflect where we think the funding source is going to come from.
Okay,
That's kind of an interesting little dilemma. So if the street fund pays for the improvement, or whatever you want to call it, since it's not really increasing capacity,
Mhm.
does the street fund own that pipe? Or do they deed it over to the utility, which is a separate,
I don't think the street fund
Animal.
would own it.
what the
We're
street fund
just-
paid for it?
We're just doing what the auditors and the local programs tell us we have to do.
That's fine,
and how we
it's
have-
just
how
kind of
we
a
have
little
to-
bit of a,
Yeah, it is. It wasn't,
of a-
it's not how I wanted to pay for that pipe.
well, I appreciate that, but it's just, we always got to keep the utility separate from
Yeah.
Right.
the
Mhm.
street funds, and if
Yeah.
the street fund buys it, how does it get transferred to the utility, and
Yeah.
something that
Interesting
no one
question.
can noodle on.
yeah.
It's,
You have
yes.
nothing better to think
Yeah, I had
about.
nothing better to think about than how do I take this fictional pipe and
Yeah.
move it around. So yeah, again, sewer capital. I'm glad the marine pump station stands out because it doesn't have budget authority. You're gonna have a city contract tonight, and so expect a budget amendment to come forward in August, requesting budget authority to address this, but plus the contract.
Other thing too, we didn't have a loan.
Yep.
When we developed the budget. Remember,
Right.
we applied for a grant.
Right,
We hoped we were gonna get a grant. We didn't get the grant, but we got a 2% loan.
right.
And that isn't reflected in
We
the
haven't
budget.
executed that.
No.
We're close. And
No.
so that is be part of the budget amendment too, is recognizing those source funds.
Yeah.
And the repayment.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
an important piece
Yeah.
too.
So we have spoken with the state revolving fund loan officer, confirmed that yes, we have been offered the loan. Now we just have to work out the funding agreement. It's all going to be available for us once we sign the funding agreement. It's 2%, 20 years. So it's everything that we expected. And so what we really need to do is bring that document forward. Once we get that complete, we'll need a budget amendment for expenditure authority. We'll need the funding agreement acceptance, approval from council for the funding source. And then we have the contract coming forward tonight to actually start doing the work. So there's three big pieces of this project that are going to be coming forward.
Timing is rather interesting. We're going to approve the work before we have the funds.
But it says right in our agreement, or what we're approving tonight, that they won't execute it until the loan's executed.
And that was something we actually talked about this week is, hey, in a perfect world, we bring this all together real
Right.
cleanly. Funding
Right.
source, approved loan agreement, budget amendment, and contract award. Okay, that's not the world we're living in. But what we wanted to do was verify that the funding source would be there. And so that's why we got on the call this week with the agency and said, hey, walk us through this. How does this work? Should we have any concerns about awarding the contract? They said, no, you shouldn't have any concerns. You're awarded. It's a matter of just getting that agreement signed. And any expenses incurred prior to the funding agreement after May 2018 is reimbursable from the loan proceeds.
Oh, good.
So as we award the contract, start spending money,
Okay.
we will then reimburse ourselves from the loan proceeds.
Cool.
Got a
Okay.
$5 million loan, and this is for a 30% design that is gonna give us alternatives, and we need to get going on developing those
I
alternatives.
Yeah.
well, it's not for finance discussion, but the location of it was
That's part of it.
yeah.
That's right.
And the only other thing I'll mention with the marina pump station that we did confirm with the lending agency that we're going for 30% design right now. Once we get to 100% design, we're going out to the street. If we find that the project costs have escalated quite a bit, because we only got, what, 4 million, 5 million, something like that?
Yeah,
And if we find, hey, the project's really $7-8 million, now we have a funding shortfall. Can we come back to you guys to request an increase in our loan? And said, yes, you can do that at that time, okay, prior to going out on the street. We can up it to your new 100% design standards. And then after you award the contract, we can only go up 10% from there. So it'd be real
Oh,
important that we
okay.
stay on top of the timing
Right.
with the design. So once 100% is designed, we're going to be very cautious about what that cost figure is. If it's gone up and we feel like we're going to need some additional borrowing, we'll approach the state and say, hey, can we please increase our loan to make up for the funding shortfall?
And then we're gonna have to stay within 10%.
That's right, because
After
at that
we award it,
point,
yes.
now we're on the street, we're awarded the contract, now they're only willing to increase it again up to 10%
Right.
of the price. So it's really important, and I'm glad we talked that out with them, because we wouldn't have known that if you could do that. So, stormwater projects. Again, I have the Tremont broken out here, so you just kind of see it. Again, I'm not sure if I like that approach or if I want to keep Tremont altogether in transportation. Park facility, again, another project that we don't have budget authority for. And so again, that's another budget amendment I'd expect to come forward in August. In August, I'm trying to bring forward as many cleanup budget amendments as I can. Like this one, the Marina Park, anything that we identify like that. I want to get on top of that so we get back to a timely current budget.
What's that little number up at the top of the 720 Prospect?
Is it what?
449?
449.
Is that the actual?
So I think the budget was for 250,000 or 275,000, and we spent 274,551.
So that's the balance left.
Yeah, so technically, I guess there's capacity of $449.
Don't tell Nick.
I was gonna
Nick, there's no
say.
capacity. I didn't know you were in the room. I forgot.
Our kitchen cabinets aren't in yet.
They're coming. We've got
Okay.
it stored.
You can see from this graph real clearly where we're at with McCormick Park Phase 2. So still a lot of capacity to go, but at least we're finally starting to get the invoices in. And transportation. Let's see what's going on here. Again, before this was all green, so it's good to see we're actually spending some of our dollars. And it looks like this one will require a budget amendment as well.
It was the additional environmental work that had to happen out
Is that the one that's on the,
there. No, you've already approved that. You just haven't gotten the budget amendment yet. It was
Yeah.
to get to what we were doing tonight.
And this is
the
on the agenda
application.
tonight.
But it's not that.
The Clifton Anderson, isn't that one on?
It is on the agenda, but not for that $8,000. They've already approved
It's
that
the grant
contract.
Correct,
application.
correct.
It's a grant
say
application.
it wasn't that much.
Yeah. Okay. And
We're probably gonna need to get going to the next couple of things.
Okay.
There's a few more things. We're out of
That's
time.
all right, so we'll move to the water sewer fund split. I'm hoping to keep this succinct. So, if you recall, we met maybe 2 meetings ago, and I said one thing I'd like to do is currently we have water sewer in a single fund, 401, and then I'd like to move our operations and capital separate. So I'd like to have the water sewer operations and the water sewer capital. The reason for transparency and budgeting makes it a lot more efficient for us to do that, and we can monitor our operations and monitor our capital differently.
You
rather
could
than
have
combining.
a water operations, a sewer operations, a water capital, and a sewer capital.
So that was the request, right? Originally, I said, hey, I just want to split the water sewer operations to water sewer operations and water sewer capital, 2 funds. And John said, well, no, why don't you take it that next step and look at separate water sewer altogether,
Mhm.
and that would result in the 4 funds.
Yeah.
So this is meant to look at what that world would look like if we separated into the 4 funds.
Can we talk about colors here?
No colors. No colors. All right. So what do you guys have in front of you? Sewer. Okay. We'll look at the sewer operations first. Okay. And I believe I showed you guys the workbook where we are combining all the data and the numbers. So this is just an output of all the forecasting, all the gathering of the data. But what this showed me was that looking at our projection of sewer revenues, that's the black line, and our projection of what expenses are going to be for operations only. Okay, again, this is only operations. This tells me that we will have sufficient revenue to cover operations. Okay. And again, this would be the sewer fund. So the sewer fund will look like this. This is kind of what we think the world of sewer fund looks like over the next 10 years. The sewer ending fund balances is this next chart. And you can see here that you would have an operating fund and a capital fund. You'd also have, I've established some minimal fund balance targets as a measuring stick, that we want to maintain this level of funding in each of these categories in the operating and capital. We want to have a working capital in our operations for cash flow reasons, and we want to have cash in our capital fund for cash flow reasons. So I established some policy targets. And again, what this tells me is that for operations and capital, we will always be able to meet our policy targets. And so when I look at the two combined, I say, hey, splitting sewer out of water, sewer is going to do just fine. It can cover operations, and it can cover its capital CIP for the next 6 to 10 years. So that was good news on the sewer front.
Yeah, that's good.
Now, again, we're splitting these, so then we look at the water fund. So when we look at the water fund,
That's not quite so good.
it's not as good as the sewer, but we knew that going into this story. But overall, when we look at the water fund operations, again, the black line, we see that water fund operations is covering all of its cost, and you don't get to a crossover point until 2025. Again, the water and sewer rate revenue flat line at 2020 once the rate increases have all gone into effect. And we haven't made any policy decisions on rate increases going forward, so I capped it there.
Hopefully, we have some of our own wells online, and a part of the equation is our expenses go down, because we're not buying water.
We're buying for
Water.
Vernon.
That's a good point.
Part of the equation, but that's not all of it.
Yeah, for this, I didn't assume that, so
It's realistic that if it's not after we've got hard numbers on these capital projects, we need to do another, whether it's Katie Isaacson or someone at the end of
Analysis.
19, early 2020, we need to do another analysis of the utilities.
Yeah.
I tell you what, every time I get my City of Port Orchard water sewer storm bill, it shocks me.
Yeah. It's crazy going up.
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
I experienced that in Olympia too, so don't feel so bad.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well-
our water bills.
You know, so when we look at the water fund ending balance targets, again, Rob jumped on this right away. We're good through 2022. We don't start to see any issues in our capital fund. Again, operationally, we're fine. Okay, so
Right.
let's start there. From a water operations fund, we're covering our expenses. We still have, we're meeting our funding targets. Okay, minimum funding targets. It's on the capital side is where we see our capital fund balances start to get depleted. And we finally cross over in 2023 where we say, okay, we don't have enough cash in our capital account to complete the projects in that fiscal year and going forward.
Remember too, though, this is good information, but it was also on, once we update that capital plan, the other capital plan showed very modest growth. And this is based on the capital facilities
Yes.
plan, correct?
Yep.
We're seeing different growth than that, and we could change, the cycle could change again by the time we get to 2023.
Yep.
So, based on the information we had and the capital facilities we planned, what we put together, this is our projection.
Yeah, and so Rob jumped on this right away earlier when I was showing him, say, look, we got a problem in 2023. I said, yes, that's true, but that's not a problem we can't manage around. Because again, this is all based on all these capital projects getting executed on the timeline that we've laid out in the CIP. So far, if you look at all these green bars up here, I already know that's not the case, right? Because I'm looking at 2018 going, well, look, according to my plan here, these would all be nearly done
Right.
for 2018. So I know I will have cash build up in 18 and 19 that I'll push forward, hopefully. But this is a cash problem. And you can solve the cash problem a couple different ways. So some of these projects we could consider borrowing, okay? There's a couple projects that Rob said, hey, we probably won't do that one because it was in the original CIP. It was
It's this well
This
out,
one.
this artesian well
our
out here.
teaching well out here for $1.2 million in 23.
And if we try to cap that, we'll float the parking lot. And, I mean, one harebrained idea we have is doing an artesian thing that all the hippies can fill their bottles up like Olympia, and it spills into a water feature that goes into a storm drain and out into the bay.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd probably do that for $500,000 versus trying to freeze an artesian well like ecology wants us to do.
So there were a couple of projects on there that I felt we could manage around, especially given this is 7-8 years out. And there's another funding solution, because again, this is a cash problem. It just says, hey, we don't have enough cash in here to cash fund all these projects. Okay, so we can borrow, want to do that, externally, go out to the state, get grant money, there's grant opportunities still. So we could grant money, we could borrow from the state, we'd do a bond.
Or
We
not
could
do projects that.
Not do projects. We could also do, which would make this a little more clear and transparent, is it would be an interfund loan. Borrow money from our sewer fund with an interest rate to repay the water, or to the big one. Borrow money from the sewer fund and have the water fund repaying the sewer fund for the borrowing plus interest as a true interfund loan. So it's a little
So
more clear
couldn't
and
we
transparent.
also, you know, we can wait until the problem is and increase rates to compensate, or we can increase rates earlier and bank them to compensate
Yep.
for this when it goes
It,
forward.
it depends on that rate analysis too.
Right.
If it's replacement of aging infrastructure, that's rates. If it's true capital project for development, then that is connection fees.
Well,
So,
development, yeah, that's different.
but that's the same line item.
Yeah, I
But-
think what we need to do is look at the projects to make sure that
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
still viable projects, and then let's look
Yeah,
at
and that's what I'm
who's
saying.
gonna pay for it.
Let's get the McCormick Lift Station 2, the Well 13, and the Marina Pump Station designed and maybe out to bid before, so we have real numbers
But you're
versus
talking two
assumptions.
different funds. We're
Yeah.
talking
Yeah, but
water is the well, is the
I think
problem.
we need to holistically look
No, I
at all
agree,
of them.
I agree, but the sewer seems to be
Mhm.
holding its own,
But
all
what
right.
we-
But water is the one that's,
What I appreciate that Noah's gone through this exercise, and we know that we're okay for a minimum of the next 5 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so we have an opportunity to
Plan.
refine the capital,
Yep,
do the
I
plan,
agree.
and figure out the financing.
Totally
So,
agree,
yeah,
We don't have a crisis.
yeah.
right, exactly.
And we can, which was my concern when we first talked about this, what are the unintended consequences of separating these funds?
Right, and
Is
this is
one
it.
subsidizing the other? And what
Right.
we learned is, no, we're okay
Right.
in the short run,
Except for the capital issues.
except for the capital
Yeah.
issues.
So we're okay.
So we did the exercise as you requested. I think it actually came back
Right.
Good.
So
Right.
I could feel comfortable saying, yeah, if the council so wants to choose to split these, we can do that and feel pretty comfortable with what the future looks like for the next 6 years.
I like to split them like this. I think it's fairly helpful to understand where the issue lies.
Yep. And I really like the Tremont and Park
Good.
deals.
Yeah,
I thought those were
those are
pretty.
great.
I wish I had them for other projects. I was just trying to push as hard as I could to
Right.
get this all out. So
But
in
we
the
do
future,
need
I
to talk
expect
colors.
Yep.
Yeah, don't use brown for sewer. Ugh.
Okay, Nick, you're
All right,
on.
Nick's up.
Can you 5 minutes?
Well, once we get the,
Which one? You want the red line?
that one, yeah.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, the printed copy that they printed it as a clean version rather than as the red line version.
Okay.
But we talked about this about a month and a half ago, basically as we were doing the analysis for what the new courthouse was gonna cost the city to actually review. We realized that the permit revenue was going to be totally insufficient to cover the actual cost. We would have brought in $66,000, and we did talk to a consultant, and we're in the ballpark of $300,000 or $400,000 for review and inspection services for a project of that size. So and that really depends on their final valuation. But we actually the BHC acquired a company that I worked with previously who inspected a $100 million school project that I worked on, and so they're real familiar with doing that type of work, and said essentially the Gig Harbor Paulsbo numbers are going to be about right for covering the cost of a project on that high end in the tens of millions of dollars range. I think at the last meeting, and Noah, did you have the revenue versus expenditure for DCD?
Okay.
So Councilmember Ashby had asked us to look at what our department, DCD, actually brings in versus what its expenses are, and we're nowhere close to covering our actual operating costs. And keep in mind that some of the things that are included in the budget are code enforcement and long-range planning type activities that aren't typically recoverable, exactly. And so, I mean, I think a 50% increase wouldn't cover it, and this is a much smaller increase, wouldn't cover the operating costs of the department. And so it's not like we're going to be making money off of building permits as a result of this increase.
Right, and I don't think our intention was to ever have the department be
Self-funded.
self-funded,
We
yeah.
haven't
Correct.
spoke to that.
So I, in the last 2 pages of the handout that I gave you, the table showed a comparison of Port Orchard, Paulsbo, Bremerton, Gig Harbor, Kitsap County, and then there was a couple from Thurston County. At the very end of that table, we have our Port Orchard proposed alternative 1 and an alternative 2. Alternative 1 was a true hybrid of Paulsbo. For projects up to $1 million, it followed exactly what Paulsbo had, with the exception that it rounds off, drops any change off of any of these prices, and then went to the Gig Harbor rate for projects over $1 million. And you'll see that for the courthouse building, it's $234,000 in revenue for that type of project.
But it's gonna cost us 400, you said.
I think he said 300 was a good conservative estimate
Okay.
for that, and that's a full service big firm. I think that if we go with somebody smaller, I think this is going to be likely to be sufficient. The alternative 2, the difference is that if you look at it, for a project of $1 million and over, it's $7,037 for the first million, plus $450 for each additional $1,000, rather than under alternative 1, it was $5 for each additional $1,000. And so that, changes the equation to the tune of about $20,000 savings to a developer for a project in that range. So it brings us closer to Paulsbo's number, but it's still in excess of what Paulsbo charges. So the draft that I've presented to you is Port Orchard proposed alternative 1, which is kind of what we discussed in the meeting. And can I see the mouse there?
There you go.
The draft here, so we basically amended the building valuation tables. So you'll see it's $7,037 for the first million, plus $5 for each additional $1,000. That's the Port Orchard proposed alternative 1, and that's the handout that we've given you. And my recollection is that there were, of the other red line changes we previously presented, I don't think there were any concerns. It was really, this was the main issue that we were concerned with, and we wanted more numbers from finance on department revenue and expenditures.
So if we move forward with this, what outreach do you plan to do with the building industry? You take it to their monthly meeting?
I mean,
or-
it's really, I think I would just email it to the director and say that the city's considering updating its fee resolution, and, it's gonna
I
be.
think we should probably take this to maybe is September's work study fast enough
What-
to move on this? Whole council?
Well, I think we took it to June work study already.
Okay.
I think really the question is, do you want to take public testimony in an actual hearing versus?
So a work study probably isn't the place
Yeah, I would
for
just
that.
say bring it on a regular agenda, and if you want to have a hearing and take testimony, you can.
So maybe we take 2 council meetings.
Yeah.
Things
Take
that,
testimony.
Yeah.
looking at both our Plan 1 and our Plan 2, if you, 1, 2, 3, the fourth line down, 25,001, I would just jump that all the way to the 100,000, because in both cases, you're raising it $12 for each additional 1,000.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure why Paulsbo did that, but we were just copying the
Right.
ranges.
Yeah. I would suggest that they probably, at some point had a different dollar amount in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they made them the same. And so that would be the only reason to keep it.
I would suggest to keep it just so that we can
Just so
point
that
to
you
it
could-
as it's
We
same.
mirrored it after
Yeah,
Paulsbo.
after Paulsbo. Well, I'm fine with bringing it to the council.
So I would suggest a hearing at the regular August meeting and then bring it for action at the September meeting.
Okay, so a second meeting in August?
Yes.
We would take hearing. and
Well, I
then-
guess we have the first meeting actually would work too.
There's only 2.
Yeah.
There's 2.
So the first meeting in August, a hearing, and then the second meeting in August.
Why don't we go are you okay with the September adoption?
There's a couple of fee policy, I mean, there's some other policy language changes in here that are not financially significant, but I think are things that we've been trying to clean up. But I don't have a problem waiting. I mean, I think our effective date was, we were going to make it effective a few weeks after adoption, just to give people time to roll this out. But if we're gonna wait that long, do we wanna make it effective on a more rapid schedule?
I would be more comfortable with that to give time to get
I agree.
feedback.
I agree.
So bring it the second meeting, which is the third week in August, and with a planned adoption, the first meeting in September, and maybe it goes into effect October 1st.
Works for me.
Is this the current?
This is a clean copy of the updated document. I have it in Redline as well, it printed in clean.
Okay, this table 1,
Yes.
and I haven't read any of this, but if this table 1 is supposed to be our plan 1, it is not.
Well, I did not copy and paste them from one another, so it's possible that,
And what's different is the 50,000 to 100,000 is 9 and it should be 12.
Right.
50,000. Oh, yeah, you're right. Let me see which one of those is right, actually, because we were trying to mimic Paulsbo. I'll go back to Paulsbo's source document and see whether this is typed wrong for Paulsbo's number and therefore for Port Orchard's number, or I suspect it is supposed to be 9.
Okay, then that would reduce our numbers.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's gonna reduce those.
Well, we don't
numbers.
have, you mean for the project examples?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I don't think we have an example of a project in that range. We don't have an example of a project between $50,000 and $100,000 on the,
no, but, oh, then I'm misunderstanding.
so you have to, so if you have a project of $27 million, you only use the last line, these aren't additive. It's the project valuation, it's a base fee of $7,037, and then it's $4 for each additional $1,000 in value.
Okay, but this 7,037 should be an accumulation of all of these.
Yes, yeah, I think the, for
Yeah,
the 500,000
So
to a
it will
million.
make, it will adjust that if
Yes.
it's 9.
Yeah, I'll double check that.
Okay.
All right.
Good
I
catch.
have one additional item. It was a bomb the county commissioners, or Commissioner Gilder, dropped on us at Housing Kitsap today, and I knew this day was coming. So you have to
Oh.
promise not to shoot the messenger as I hand you this. So,
But I think we will.
Norris got this, but I gave it to Sharon today, and the county commissioners have given, the housing authority is not financially solvent, nor are they currently, even, right now they're operating under 3 years of debt forgiveness and not paying on this debt. And it's the debt for the Norm Dix Center, and the long-term debt is the debt for the condos. And the county borrowed $40 million at one point that they've got paid down to $22 million at this point. The request that they came to us today was, the other cities was, would we consider a 10-year commitment of each city committee paying $100,000 a year, so $1 million over the next 10 years to help pay the $22 million. So what was asked is what the benefit Housing Kitsap provides to our communities
Exactly.
for us to consider this. And I've got Sharon, so I came back today and I asked, so Sharon's been given a routing number to research what our legal obligation is and whether we, if this becomes, it will hurt our relationship with the county that I've worked very hard to make better. But it's not $100 million, or excuse me, $1 million better. So
How much are we currently contributing for that?
nothing.
The housing authority, they're providing that services for nothing?
They get a lot of their money from one-time revenue, from development fees, from the projects and the properties. So we just broke ground as an agency on the Sherman Ridge project. It's a HUD,
Right.
it's.
Well, I'm gonna be real interested to hear Sharon's response, because I'm not sure if it's not something like the library where we're obligated to provide it.
Yes.
And therefore, we went together and formed the housing authority. We
Yeah.
all contribute to it
So,
to meet our requirements.
I don't have the answers, and I'm researching the answers. This was the request, and we all went, so it's nothing. These things are nothing. They both benefited the city of Bremerton. They were poor decisions made
Mismanaged.
many years ago, and we were party to it. As a city, we were on the board. It was.
Approved it.
Yeah, and we approved it. So I don't know what the answer is right now. I probably gonna, if we have to have one, and we don't have any liability related to this, we might want to talk to Bremerton. They're running their own housing authority, and is there an opportunity there? I don't have answers at this point. I was asked to submit something to our budget process. I'd be more comfortable asking that we, not at this level, support something that's benefiting us going forward versus paying for past sins. This agency should have been bankrupted in the economic downturn, and it wasn't. But once again, our mayor was sitting on the board at that time and as culpable as this process. So I'm just,
You brought up a good point to me, because I don't know. Does the mayor sitting on that board obligate the city without council's approval?
good question.
I bet
That's an
not.
awfully good question.
I
Those
bet
are awfully good
not.
questions, and that's why when these,
Because
When-
we've had some mayors that I wouldn't want them without council's approval.
and that's why when 911's board changes came about, or their bylaws changes,
Right.
I think it's important that the council is making
Correct.
those appointments, that it's not
Right.
just a given.
Right,
That the
because I
mayor
don't know,
is at the
the
table.
mayor is following policy, so that would be my question.
Yeah, good question.
And Beck, this is hot off the press this morning,
Well, yeah,
and
so do we shoot Rob or Ed or Charlotte?
I think we all just take a deep breath at this point, and
Because they need
then they weren't the county commissioners.
Right.
I had
Charlotte was.
well, and Steve Bauer, I had a
Was
lunch.
Charlotte or was Jan?
No, I think Charlotte was.
I thought Jan was all over this.
Yeah.
I
No?
think it was Charlotte.
I could be, but I thought it was Charlotte.
Well, it
I had
lasted a
lunch with
while.
Josh Brand last Tuesday and got an education
Okay.
on the history of this, and I'll share it with you sometime.
Okay.
Steve Bauer the Treetops was sold they netted $3 million. So the county commissioners, a county commissioner was very stern about the process to liquidate assets. They liquidated very profitable properties to take the $42 million down to the dollar amount that they borrowed. And it was those were bad decisions too, because they netted Treetops $3 million. That thing was in the downturn generating $850,000 a year in revenue. That's how this could have been paid for. But they were all
What are
worried about
Treetops?
it was an apartment complex, a large apartment complex in Silverdale.
Okay,
And they sold it off. It was one of their assets,
Okay.
and it was a good asset. So they kept all the marginal stuff
because there was no market for
there was
them.
no market for them, and they sold all the good stuff to generate cash, and we're stuck with it. We're the agency stuck with it. So with that,
Well, you raise a good question, and one I have is, this debt for the Norm Dix Center. I mean, that's clearly
well, and
not only nothing that benefits the city of Port Orchard, but actually at the time hurt the city of Port Richard, so.
And the other the piece that what's left of this is housing sold their interest. So this debt right now,
Bremerton.
they sold it to Bremerton, and they went and bought the new building in Silverdale. So there's an asset
Right.
to support that debt, and so I don't think the end.
Okay.
It's your decision.
More to come.
More to come.
More to come,
And I
and
don't
with
believe
that-
the answer is yes.
The
I
committee
don't-
meeting is adjourned.
Yes.